Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 4th of September. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. President Park calls for speedy deregulation in the labour market and service industries to create jobs and revitalize Korea's slumping economy. She says the country should grab this opportunity to pull itself out of an economic slowdown. The government and the ruling party agreed to raise cigarette prices by up to 80% to encourage smokers to stub out the habit. Plus, US President Barack Obama says the United States will not be intimidated by Islamic State militants after the beheading of a second American journalist and will build a coalition to destroy the group. But our top story this morning is right here in Korea, and President Park Geun-hye is demanding the government speed up its deregulation efforts, holding her second such meeting on the matter at the presidential office on Wednesday. The president told her ministers and top private sector representatives that excessive and outdated regulations are preventing the country from reaching its full potential. Choi Sun reports.
내년 중에는 그런 쪽들은 좀 허용이 될 수 있도록 이렇게 하겠습니다.
내년이요?
예, 이 법을 개정을 좀 해야 되는 상입니다. 본법을.
저기 오염시키는 그것이 경미할 경우에는 그 허용할 수도 있다 그런 규정도 있다면서요?
Following up on the government's deregulation efforts, President Park impelled officials to actively carry through the reforms. She urged the government and parliament to swiftly pass related bills so that Korea doesn't miss an opportunity to pull itself out from an economic slowdown. The government said it has nearly completed 4/5 of the reforms from March, while about a dozen others await parliamentary approval. For instance, a regulation that required employers to report to both the Labor and Justice ministries about changes made to contracts with foreign employees was lifted, simplifying the hiring process. Laws have been revised to allow food trucks to operate inside amusement parks with hopes to offer more startup opportunities, create jobs, and diversified food culture. The president, who postponed the follow-up 2 weeks ago to give officials more time to complete the reforms, couldn't stress enough the need to achieve tangible results.
먼저 많은 것을 하겠다고 계획만 발표하기보다는 하나의 규제라도 제대로 풀어서 국민들이 그 효과를 피부로 느끼도록 해야 합니다.
For her deregulation drive to maintain its momentum and start unleashing growth, President Park called for incentives and penalties regarding reforms for public employees and better cooperation between the central and local governments. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Now staying with domestic politics, and lawmakers have voted on whether to strip a ruling party lawmaker of his immunity from arrest. Song Kwang-ho has been accused of taking cash in return for political favors, over $50,000, but he denies those charges. Our Ji Myung-gil reports on how the National Assembly sided with him and vetoed his arrest.
Ruling Saenuri Party lawmaker Song Kwang-ho will remain immune from arrest for the remainder of the 100-day regular parliamentary session.
Among a total of 223 votes, 73 are in favor, 118 are against, 8 have abstained, and 24 are invalid. The arrest motion for lawmaker Song Kwang-ho is rejected.
The four-term lawmaker stands accused of taking some $63,000 in bribes in 2012 from local railway supplier AVT in exchange for business favors. At the time, Song was the chairman of the Parliamentary Land and Maritime Committee, which oversees the Korea Rail Network Authority. Before the plenary vote, Song was given a chance to make a personal address.
I have been accused of taking bribes from a train component maker but I've never been asked to give favors to any railway part supplier and have never pressured them for money.
By law, Korean lawmakers are immune from arrest during parliamentary sessions. If Wednesday's motion had passed, Song's immunity would have been stripped. The stage for today's vote was set by a prosecution-led anti-corruption campaign. The ruling Saenuri party said it would not stand in the way of the investigation. Regarding the hundreds of pending bills related to stimulating the economy, they went untouched during Wednesday's plenary session as the rival parties continued their discord over the special Seoul ferry bill. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, across the EC in Japan, and the Prime Minister there, Shinzo Abe, has carried out a major executive reshuffle, his first, in fact, since returning to office in December 2012. He has kept his core ministers, but he has added 5 women to his cabinet and appointed some China-friendly lawmakers to key party posts. Our Kim Min-ji reports on his new team.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Wednesday appointed 2 veteran lawmakers with close ties to China to key party posts in an apparent bid to improve frosty relations with Beijing. Abe appointed outgoing Justice Minister Sadakazu Danigaki as the Secretary General of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and Toshihiro Nikai to a second top post. This shakeup is seen as a move to strengthen party unity and revamp his image as his approval rating has dipped to around 50%. Meanwhile, Abe's main political rival Shigeru Ishiba, who turned down the national security legislation post, will assume a newly created cabinet post aimed at boosting regional economies. Former Senior Vice Defense Minister Akinori Eto will take on the security legislation post as well as the defense minister position. Abe said his new team will focus on lifting the country out of deflation.
Putting the economy as the new cabinet's top priority, we will do all we can to end the deflation and to implement our growth strategies.
Abe retained 6 of the 18 ministers, including Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga and Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida. The Prime Minister also tapped 5 women to cabinet positions, matching the record set in 2001. Yuko Obuchi, the daughter of a former Prime Minister, was named the new Trade Minister, and former Gender Equality Minister Sanae Takaichi will now take over as Communications Minister. This shakeup is Abe's first since returning to office 20 months ago, marking the longest record since the Second World War. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now staying in Japan, and that country's foreign minister has vowed to increase efforts to realize talks between Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese President Xi Jinping in November. This on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing. Speaking to reporters after retaining his post in that cabinet reshuffle on Wednesday, Fumio Kishida cited a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Wang Li last month in Myanmar and said he will build upon such talks to achieve meetings at a higher level. He expressed readiness to improve bilateral ties with China, saying that ensuring stability in their relations greatly affects peace and stability in the region. The 2 leaders have yet to hold a summit together, as relations have been strained almost at breaking point by territorial disputes and Japan's ongoing denial of its history. The United States has confiscated assets from the family of former South Korean President John Doo-hwan. The U.S. Justice Department says it seized $500,000 that John's daughter-in-law had invested in a Pennsylvania company. In a statement Wednesday, the assistant attorney in the case said the former president had received some $200 million in bribes from Korean companies while in office and had laundered his ill-gotten gains in Korea and the U.S. In February, U.S. authorities seized more than $700,000 from the former president's second son following a house sale in California. Now, John Doo-hwan, now 83 years old, took power after the 1979 assassination of longtime military ruler Park Chung-hee and was president for 8 years, of which most were tarnished by a vast amount of corruption.
that a team of South Korea...
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. Arirang News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Now, if you're a smoker living in Korea, there's a good chance you'll be paying a whole lot more for a pack of cigarettes pretty soon. This after the government and the ruling party agreed to raise cigarette prices by as much as 80% to reduce the country's rather high smoking rate. An official from the ruling Saenuri party said on Wednesday that the two sides still need to discuss the finer details of the plan, but they are reviewing a price hike of around $2 per pack. More than 70% of cigarettes in Korea are sold for around $2.50. This is much, much cheaper than the average price of $6.40 in OECD member countries. However, since the sudden large increase in cigarette prices will probably go down pretty badly with smokers, officials are considering whether to gradually raise prices over a 3 to 5 year period. Korea's finance minister warned last week that the nation had entered the early stages of deflation, sparking debate on whether the economy could easily free itself from this protracted economic slump we're feeling here in Korea. But unlike the minister's assessment, many experts say the economy could be doing better, but it isn't really in an early deflationary stage. Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's inflation rate has remained below the 2% level for nearly 2 years. The latest consumer price index has also pointed to a slowdown from a recent pickup. The index rose at its slowest pace in 4 months, rising 1.4% in August from a year ago. That also falls far below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. But many experts say the domestic economy running a low inflation rate does not mean it's in deflation.
When we say deflation, it means a minus inflation rate is continuing for such a prolonged period of time that people's expected inflation rate also turns to minus. So it's too early to talk about deflation.
They add that the focus should be on the nation's core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, and that index actually grew at the fastest pace in 2.5 years last month at 2.4%. Experts say Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan had political reasons for raising concerns about deflation.
There's a lot of fiscal policy that the government wants to engage in. For example, changes in the welfare policy, measures to try to invigorate some new industries, but that's all being held in status at the National Assembly. So I think this was his way to try to shock the National Assembly into moving on some of these issues.
Choi's comments also pressured the Bank of Korea to further lower its key interest rate with this month's monetary policy meeting just around the corner. But as concerns linger over the nation's mounting household debt problem, experts say it's likely the central bank will hold off a rate cut this month. The bank lowered the key rate to 2.25% in August, the first rate cut since May last year. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, Samsung Electronics has been ordered to cough up a €35.1 million fine, which is roughly $46 million. They have to give it to the European Union. This for an alleged price fixing on micro card chips used in mobile phones. An investigation into 3 companies, Samsung, Philips and Infineon, began in 2008, and the European Commission has issued a penalty for them, saying they colluded between the years 2003 and 2005 for price fixing of their smart card chips used in mobile SIM cards. Samsung's fine was actually reduced by 30% because they cooperated so well with the investigators. Philips, however, says it plans to appeal as they firmly believe the claims are unfounded. Now, technology has broken down barriers to education by allowing students to take cheap and sometimes even free online classes from learning centres all around the world. And with more universities joining in the movement for open online courses, Yulian tells us how the trend could show us what education might look like in the future.
Learn everywhere, anywhere. That's now possible thanks to the power of technology, more specifically through cloud-based interconnectivity, which allows students to take classes online through multiple electronic devices. Massive open online courses, or MOOCs, have seen explosive growth in the past 2 years. A group of experts and founders of MOOC services gathered in Seoul physically and virtually on Wednesday to talk about why the paradigm shift in education has come at precisely the right time.
We also have a whole new generation of students. They are very individualistic, and it's oftentimes easier to text and tweet and Snapchat and WhatsApp and Facebook your children than it is to talk to them in person.
The online education world is also evolving through the use of big data.
The maximum student engagement was when videos were 6 minutes long. So we can gather data and answer some of these questions about how are students learning, what resources are most valued by students, how should we teach. So our hope is that with this big data of learning, we can begin to answer some of these questions.
While the method in which education is being provided is important, so is the content themselves. There's now a stronger call to digitize textbooks as well.
Textbooks are a billion-dollar market globally, and yet they seem to confound attempts to digitize them. I actually think that if anything should have been digitized first in our culture, it really should have been educational books, textbooks.
The online courses are particularly appealing for people who cannot afford to attend university. But pundits say a day where most of ordinary students attend online lectures while reading a digitalized textbook written by a professor that's halfway across the world may come sooner than expected. Yulian, Arirang News.
Right, well, let's take a look now through the international headlines we're following on this Thursday morning. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the News Centre. Morning, Eunice.
Hello, Mark.
US President Barack Obama has vowed to degrade and destroy the Islamic State killers behind the execution of that second American journalist.
You're right, and the pledge was echoed by U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, who said Washington will do everything it can to remove threats that harm the American people and their interests. Our Hwang Seung-hee reports.
So the bottom line is this. Our objective is clear, and that is to degrade and destroy ISIL so that it's no longer a threat, not just to Iraq, but also to the region and to the United States.
Following U.S. President Barack Obama's pledge to destroy Islamic State on Wednesday, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel outlined the dangers posed by the terror group. In an interview with CNN, Hagel called IS something we have never seen before and added his job as Secretary of Defense is not to second-guess what may be or what's going to be. Pointing out that Islamic State controls half of Iraq and Syria today, the U.S. defense chief said Washington will do everything possible to destroy the group's capacity to inflict harm on the American people and values. Earlier this week, President Obama said he would send 350 additional troops to Iraq to protect U.S. interests in Baghdad and in the north of the country after another American journalist was killed by Islamic State. While a fresh battle against the extremists seems inevitable, Pentagon officials estimate the weapons, fuel, and other expenses are costing the U.S. around $225 million a month. And that could be a difficult challenge for President Obama, who now has to reverse one of the key tenets of his two presidential campaigns, that money once spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would be redirected to nation building at home. Hwang Seung-hee, Arirang News.
And following a Wednesday phone call with his Ukrainian counterpart, Russian President Vladimir Putin has outlined a 7-point peace plan to end months of bloody fighting that has killed nearly 2,600 people. Now, during a state visit to Mongolia, he told reporters his views on the conflict were very similar to those of his Ukrainian counterpart, Petro Poroshenko. The points included a halt to separatist fire, a pullback of government forces out of rebel-held regions, an end to airstrikes, and creating humanitarian aid corridors. However, Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk dismissed the proposal as deception, unveiled on the eve of a NATO summit that will treat the Ukraine crisis as among its top projects. Meanwhile, France has expressed its disapproval of Moscow by stopping a delivery of 2 Navy assault ships to Russia, saying that the conditions were simply not right. A 29-year-old British nurse has been declared Ebola-free after receiving 10 days of intensive treatment at the Royal Free Hospital in London. William Pooley, who had been given the experimental drug ZMapp, was discharged on Wednesday and said he considered himself fortunate, adding that the standard of care that he received was a world apart from what his friends were getting in West Africa. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization warned the Ebola death toll across West Africa had surged to more than 1,900 fatalities. And finally, we head to the U.S., where the country's second largest drugstore chain, CVS, has taken cigarettes off its shelves. The company had announced in February it would drop the sales of goods that conflicted with its healthcare mission, and it followed through by ditching tobacco products 3 weeks ahead of schedule. CVS has 7,700 retail locations across the U.S. It said its corporate name will be changed to CVS Health and offer programs to help people quit smoking.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with the upcoming Incheon Asian Games. Now, with the big event just around the corner, a sudden rule change in the team archery event is shaking things up. While team archery consists of 3 archers per team playing 4 end and shooting 24 hours for a maximum score of 240 points, World Archery, the world governing body for archery, has applied the set score format on Wednesday. With the rule change, each team will play 4 sets and will be given 2 points for a set win, 1 point for a tie, and 0 point for a set loss. Meanwhile, if the set score is at 5-1 or 6-0 after the 3rd set, the 4th set will not be played. Meanwhile, over to the 2014 FIBA World Cup, where Korea is technically eliminated from the group stage after losing their first 3 games. And with the team needing all the experience they can before the Asian Games in Incheon, they played against Lithuania earlier today but lost 79-49 as Aris Juskavicius scored game-high 20 points, including 6 3-pointers in the game. Meanwhile, Korea will face off against Mexico up next. Now, if there's something that's taking longer than finding a head coach for the national football team, it's finding a home for the NC Dinos, who are still without their own stadium. But reports have surfaced that one city is aggressively going after the NC Dinos. And this time it's the city of Seongnam, located just outside of Seoul. And according to a city official, it was Mayor Lee Jae-myung's re-election promise to bring a baseball team to the city. And now they're going after the NC Dinos. And when it comes to a stadium, they plan to tear down the old sports complex and build a new one, or even build one at a completely different site. And finishing things off, no baseball on Wednesday night as all 4 games were rained down, but rain or shine, you have football. So let's take a look at the Suwon Samsung Blue Wings take on the Busan I-Park. And of course, going into the match here, Suwon firing away early, gets several chances until Roger in the 22nd minute of the match finds the back of the net on a penalty as Suwon takes an early 1-0 lead. Match going into the second half with Suwon up 1-0, and both sides continue to fire away with a total of 29 shots being taken by both teams. But the 59th minute, it's Kim Ik-hyun, the equalizer here as the match comes to an end with a 1-1 draw. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
We'll have beautiful early autumn weather today. The sun has come out behind the clouds and skies should stay clear all day long, and temperatures will be much warmer today. Daytime highs will be about 4 to 8 degrees higher than yesterday, so let's take a closer look. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 28, and Gwangju and Busan will all peak to 28 as well. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 27. And Dokdo should see highs of 25. Now, typical early autumn weather will continue throughout Chuseok holidays across the nation. So overall, weather shouldn't be a problem for this coming up holiday, but be aware of temperature difference between lows and highs and take good care of yourself. That's all for now, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there, and that's just about it for this hour. But don't forget, for more of the latest stories, you can check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, or you can always download our free smartphone application. Do enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Goodbye.